Our next workshop explores how do we move the employment needle for students with disabilities. And our presenter is Dr. James Williams. He is the National Pre-ETS and Chief Operating Officer at Bloom Consulting in Austin, Texas. He is also a certified rehabilitation counselor, advanced certified autism specialist, and an adjunct professor of education at St. Edward's University, George Mason University, and Northwestern College. He obtained his bachelor's degree in special education from Sam Houston State University, his master's in rehabilitation counseling from Texas Tech University Health Science Center, and his Doctor of Education in Educational Leadership from Lamar University. He is also a certified special education teacher with experience in public and private education and social services. Dr. Williams has provided services to individuals with disabilities, particularly autism spectrum disorders, across the lifespan for the past 14 years. He continues to use his professional and personal experience with autism as a catalyst to inspire and educate others to believe in the incredible possibilities for adults and children with disabilities when they receive the appropriate support and accommodations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Dr. James Williams.
Okay, so thank you so much. First of all, I have to compliment Daryl. He has the best reading voice I've ever heard. I was like, I want Daryl to read me a story. It's like he just has that good tone. I love it. We'll go. Good afternoon. Caught myself. Good afternoon. I appreciate you guys sticking around, especially being the speaker after lunch. The bar is high, and I know that. So I will do my best. I always remind people, remember, I ate too, so I'm keeping myself awake and you. But I'm going to share something that's really passionate to my heart, and that is the employment of people with disabilities, both post-college, post-programs like Beacon, but also just in general coming out of high school. He gave you a really kind of overview of my professional titles. I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of things. I like it that way. I like being busy. And but one thing that's not on here that I want to share about is, and I kind of hinted at it in my bio, but in addition to all these professional hats that I wear, I was diagnosed myself with Asperger's syndrome when I was 12 years old. I'm 32 now, so it's been 20 years. 20-year anniversary. I don't know if that's something you celebrate, but I guess I can. But so this is a very personal and passionate journey for me. I went through this journey coming out of a program. Unfortunately, at the time, my parents and I didn't know about Beacon College. I stumbled a lot through college, but did manage to succeed just because academically I've always been very strong. And but going through that journey, I then had to kind of face that insurmountable challenge, which is, okay, great. I did all that hard work. I did the 4.5 years, whatever, who's counting, and did that hard work. What do I do with it, right? And it is kind of the, well, hopefully not $1 million, but several $1,000 question that some of you probably ask and are looking at in your son or daughter as they go through Beacon if you're a parent. And it's a very valid question to ask. And so before I jump into my content, one of the things I want to acknowledge is we have made programs like Beacon, Landmark, a lot of great programs out there that I know about, and I'm sure some I don't. There's new coming about every day, which is fantastic. We have really done, I think, an incredible job. We're not done, but we've come so far in even the 20 years or 10 years since I've been active in the workforce, or 20 years since diagnosis, developing college programs for individuals with disabilities, both learning differences, autism spectrum disorders, you name it. And by the way, I'll use that term. I may say autism, I may say learning differences. I'm speaking broadly, so just know I'm not giving you specific categories. But we've made tons of progress in the actual achievement of programs for college, getting students through college, enrolling students in college, providing coursework to students with learning differences, disabilities in college. Where I see us needing to make a lot more progress, and where I feel like we are now as a field, is the employment piece. Post-program, what happens now? Because for a lot of students and a lot of parents, they thought the journey was over after public school. or after private school, after K-12. And of course, as many parents in this room know, psych, no, not so much. And sorry, and by the way, as a former special ed teacher, I own that is a problem, unfortunately, in our profession, is we're not the best, especially at preparing parents for that transition. But then you coming through this thinking, okay, well, if we just get them through Beacon, or if we just get them through a program, then we're done. Psych, not so much. Why? Because honestly, they're going to go through the same transition many of you in this room have gone through maybe multiple times in your life. Getting a degree, getting a course of study, then having to apply that in the job world. And unfortunately, and I guess you could say somewhat fortunately or unfortunately, depends on how you look at it, college, although prepares you for a career, it's very, very different from career. And a lot of our individuals that we've worked with have realized that. So my company, Bloom Consulting, has been around for about 10 years in the Austin area. We just opened an office in Houston, and we're just opened an office in Las Vegas literally 2 weeks ago. And with our clients over the last decade plus, what we have seen is a lot of students that are good at school, and or they're not good at school, but they've gotten through school, and they think, well, the skills and the things that I've learned and all that, if I just do the same thing, I'm going to get a job and keep it. And that's just not quite true, especially depending on the job. And the reason that this becomes an issue is many times the social components of work, right? The soft skills that we like to talk about in work. And so you'll hear a lot of me use that term today, soft skills versus hard skills, things like that, because those are the areas that students are struggling. And by the way, that is not specifically just individuals with ASD, with autism or Asperger's, if you will. Individuals with ADHD and LD can, and frequently I have seen, do have soft skills challenges in the workplace as well. So don't, it's not just an autism thing, it's not just a this thing or another thing. It is truly a challenge for all. Of course, we have a website. You can learn more about our company if you'd like on our website. I also have, well, they're in my bag, but with me, I have cards. I can get them out. And if you want my information after the presentation, you're welcome to grab a card, and if I can help you, I definitely want to try. Okay, so I like to start my presentations by getting the bad out of the way. So are our students employed post-program? And honestly, the overwhelming majority or the overwhelming answer is no. Now, there are exceptions. There are some really amazing programs like Beacon and others I know of, who either are developing and really enhancing their career services and their internships and things like that post-program. But unfortunately, those are still kind of the minority, not the norm. What the norm is by and large, most of our higher functioning adults with ASD, and even those with other diagnoses, or maybe dual diagnoses, are either unemployed, stats we have for that are about 85%, or chronically underemployed, stats we have for that are about 79%. And both of those are challenges. Obviously, unemployed is a huge challenge because many times that usually means living with mom or dad or with relatives, unfortunately for a lifetime, which is obviously not a good outcome. Excuse me. But I've also seen underemployment, excuse me, tickle my throat. I've seen underemployment also cause a lot of issues, particularly the mental health ones. So I've had individuals that have gone through intensive degree training programs and are very, very good at going to college, but because of soft skills and the inability to get past an interview, they are working at McDonald's, Walmart, whatever. And that would be fine if that's what their goal was, but that's not their goal. Their goal was to get a degree and do something with it. And so that's been a big challenge as well that we've seen. Looking at the workforce participation rate of adults with disabilities, that actually is a stat that just bothers me, and I do lose sleep over. And that is 20.5% versus 68.3% for adults without disabilities. Keep in mind, that stat includes people that are employed and then people that are unemployed that are actively, thank you so much, awesome. And then people that are also actively seeking work. Okay, yes, so much better, thank you. I can breathe, something the wrong way. And so that's a concern. What I tell people is the difference between the two stats. So basically, people with disabilities are participating in the workforce at about a third the rate of those without. And that is all disabilities. That is from the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. January 2019 is the last time I pulled the stat. They actually run that stat every month, so you can look it up for yourself. And if you were lucky, it went up 0.1%. But it doesn't change a lot, to be honest. And so that's all disabilities. Then if we look at workforce participation rate of adults with ASD, about 55.1% of young adults with ASD held paying jobs outside the first 6 years out of high school. So that's pre-college, of course. That was the lowest percentage among the categories they examined. So I'll talk a little later about my dissertation and what I learned in my research team and I talked about. But one of the challenges we saw was we have a lot of underemployment, but then we also have a lot of folks that just aren't getting jobs. They're kind of that failure to launch issue. And so that's a huge challenge as well. I would also add that probably some of those students have attempted college, and maybe they didn't have support like Beacon offers. They didn't know where to get that support. They couldn't afford the support. You can pick the various reasons. And so they're also in that struggle that they tried college and maybe it didn't work. A startling stat that I have, a wonderful organization based out of New York City called Integrate. And basically, they're a nonprofit that works with, there's a couple of these folks around doing this kind of work, but I just particularly love the way they do it, and I love the people that run it. But Marcia is their kind of their lead, their director, and they basically work with large companies to develop neurodiverse employment programs, even to do training. They do a lot of different things, but basically, they're trying to move the needle. They're trying to get people with disabilities, various types. Particularly, they tend to specialize in your high-functioning autism, Asperger's folks, jobs. And her stats and their research, they found 85% of college graduates with ASD are unemployed. I'm not telling you that to discourage you. In fact, Beacon College is like, did he have to put that in? No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's realistic. And what I will tell you is they're not unemployed because they didn't get support in college or because they didn't have a place like this. They very well did, and some of them I'm sure do. The challenge is again, that soft skills component and that translation from school to work. I tell people all the time, being smart doesn't get you through an interview. How you develop a relationship with the interviewer, if you're trustworthy, if you answer the questions in a way that they understand and that they're looking for, that's what gets you a job. Many times it's also knowing somebody, the social aspect of having networks and connections, things like LinkedIn. That's what gets you a job. It's not, oh, well, we got to pick this candidate. He's the best. Why? He got A's in high school. He's obviously the best. How many employers say that? Well, in case you're wondering, none of them. They don't care. Even college, a lot of employers, I've had conversations with HR folks from large technology companies, some of the biggest in the Austin area. I actually sat down for a meeting and kind of a symposium, kind of like this, with just different folks. And there was HR folks from Google, HR folks from Facebook, some of the largest companies, Indeed. And they all said, we don't look at that stuff. We look at how can they work cohesively in a team? How can they contribute to a project? How can they work together to solve a problem? That's what we're looking for. And so really important to understand that. Same with IQ. Being really smart doesn't get you a job. In fact, I encourage you, look for studies, look for research that says that smarter people with higher IQs, are employed more often or employed in higher, I would even almost go as far to say even higher earning jobs. Not really, because unless you can sell yourself, that IQ doesn't do a lot for you. And so we talk a lot about that with our clients, that it's not a matter of just being smart, going through college, getting that degree. It's a matter of how you then take all that, put it in a package, and sell it to an employer. Or maybe you work with a program like Integrate, and they help you do that. Sure, that's great. But something has to happen there to actually get that, that interview and to get through that process. And then underemployment, which we talked about. So folks that are higher functioning, working in lower wage jobs. This one, honestly, out of everything, it's probably the thing that bothers me the most. Because by the way, if you didn't know, my initial CRC is a certified rehabilitation counselor, which means that basically I've had advanced training on how to get people with disabilities jobs. And it kills me because one of the main tenets of our federal government's approach to VR, vocational rehabilitation, has always been that if we get more people with disabilities jobs, they won't need as much government benefits, they won't need as much Social Security, we will spend money now and save money later, right? A similar tenet behind the VA and some of their programs. And it's a great idea, and it is true. Unfortunately, though, if we're getting them a low-wage job where they still need SSI, they still need a Social Security, they still need Medicaid, they still need a lot of support from their parents, we're not really moving the needle. Yeah, they're working, and maybe they have more fulfillment. Maybe they have something more to do, which is good, and I'm not negating that. But it's not really accomplishing the core tenet of my field, of the profession that I subscribe to, of let's actually help them become more independent. Let's help them become more financially independent from their families and from the government as well. And then about 79% Integrate found of young adults with ASD were working part-time, averaging about $9.11 an hour. Now, obviously, in Florida, 9/11 is not as bad, but in, a place like California, New York, some of your states that just have higher costs of living, $9.11 an hour is not going to cut it. Place like Texas, our minimum wage is $7.25 or something ridiculous like that. Hopefully nobody gets paid that anymore, but who knows? So that's something to consider as well. So I'm giving you the problem. I'm telling you kind of where we're at. What I want to share with you now, though, is ideas of what we're doing and what I've seen. Possible reasons for this, though. So I've described the water. Why is it that way? These are some ideas. I'm not going to talk about all of them. Some of them are definitely regional issues. Some of them are nationwide. Some of them are more state-specific. I'll tell you, for instance, the first one in Texas, and I can't speak for Florida. I don't know its VR system. But in Texas, we are a VR vendor. We're actually probably, I'd say, the largest in the city of Austin. We've gotten literally over the last 11 years, I can tell you because I have all their files in our file storage locker, but literally thousands of people with disabilities throughout Central Texas jobs. And in Texas, there's a huge kind of pressure to close a case quickly. And what this unfortunately does is most providers end up, that are like us, most providers end up having this pressure to where they just want to place someone with a disability, not just ASD, but with a disability in a low-level minimum wage job to get a closure. And that's one of the challenges with our VR system. It is, at the federal level, what VR cares about is how many people with disabilities did you get jobs? How many cases did you successfully close? And so while I totally understand that metric and I believe in it, it causes people to push things quickly, and it causes providers to go for quick closure, which generally means easier to get jobs, right? Lower hanging fruit. That is definitely a challenge. There are many providers in Texas that will get you a job, but there are not many that will get you a higher level job or a career level job or something that is a little bit higher up in terms of salary or benefit requirement. There's some, but not many. Most job coaching focuses on hard skills, not soft skills. So we still place people with disabilities in jobs. That service, we don't do as much of it as we used to just because of staff and the amount of time it takes, but we still do that service. And our clients that need hard skills training, very, very approachable. They need help stocking a shelf. They need help, a filing system. They need help with a computer program. My staff, my job coaches, their employers, we can work with that. We can totally move through that. We can work through that. We can help them with that. However, the soft skills piece is much more difficult, and a lot of job coaching services tend to focus on the hard skills. They don't focus on those soft skills. Symptoms related to co-occurring mental health disorders. I personally, as someone who has a diagnosis myself, I have lost 3 people in my life in the last 7 years. All had autism diagnosis. One also had a co-occurring diagnosis of anxiety and depression. All 3 committed suicide. And I will tell you, they didn't commit suicide because they had autism. They committed suicide because of the co-occurring mental health challenges they had related to it. And I think we really have to be careful. I'm hugely passionate about addressing mental health and really looking at it for what it is. I tell people many times, I can tell you, especially for my college-bound individuals, folks that, it's like some of your students that are going here or, that are at that point in their life. For many of them that I have met, their mental health disorders and those challenges are honestly causing them more grief and are a bigger barrier than their diagnosis of autism or LD or some other things. And I'm just telling you. Because, you have someone with severe anxiety. I'll give you a good example. Had a young lady. So we do vocational evaluations where we have families that'll fly in from around the country. We obviously do a lot in Texas too, but families will come in and one of my staff members is I used to do this, I just don't have time anymore with my other hats, but we'll do a vocational evaluation and really evaluate someone, let's say, coming out of college or someone coming out of high school knowing what kind of job should I be looking for, what kind of college program should I be pursuing, and we do about some 15 to 20 different batteries. It's about a 2.5-day testing process. It's very intensive. I will not make it sound it's not easy, but we are able to generate a report with some really solid recommendations about where that individual is at and where what their options are. Anyways, that aside, we met a young lady, high-functioning autism, also diagnosed with dysgraphia, but absolutely, without a doubt, one of the most intelligent human beings of any age, any gender, any ethnicity that I've ever met in my life. Absolutely brilliant. Thinks about things on a level I don't even understand, and I'm a pretty smart person. I've been to school for a while, and just totally on a different plane. And unfortunately, she is somebody who is basically stuck at home. She was graduating from a private school that had very good individualized learning support, which was awesome. She couldn't have gotten through high school without this school, and I praise them for that. But unfortunately, at the end of that, we did an evaluation with her, and her anxiety was also the most severe I have ever seen. She physically couldn't walk into a college classroom. Like she doesn't leave her home. Her anxiety is so great that she can't leave her home. I think her mom said if she gets her to go out of the house two times per week for even 5 minutes or more, that's a good week. What is her barrier? Her barrier is not her diagnosis of autism. Her barrier is her intense, extreme anxiety. So that's something we've got to look at. Emphasis on soft skills and verbal and nonverbal communication and networking application and interview processes. So we've had some clients we've worked with that are looking for business type jobs, accounting, banking, things like that. And a lot of those jobs, they do mixers or luncheons or very socially focused events around food or drinks usually as a way to recruit candidates and meet candidates. And I'm all for it. That's fine. Those are a lot of fun. Great. I love those. But the challenge is a lot of our clients struggle in those unstructured environments. And God forbid there's alcohol involved in the event. Sometimes that's even worse. And so they don't know how to navigate an event like that. So when they think of an interview, they think, oh, well, they didn't interview me. I just went there and had a couple of drinks with people. It's an interview. But they didn't say it was. It's an interview. But they weren't. They were interviewing. I'm like telling you, that's what they were doing. Like it was an informal, unstructured environment, but that's exactly what they were doing. Yes, they were not sitting there with papers and a row of chairs and stuff, yes, but it was an interview. And so that kind of interview, really, really, really a lot of our clients struggle with because they're thinking interview as in like go into an office, shake someone's hand and sit down and answer questions and leave. And that's not always what interviews look like, especially today. Training chosen based on interest, not actual employability. I am someone who followed his passion. My passion has been helping other people with disabilities like myself achieve things in their life, whether that's employment, independent living, usually a combination of all of those. I was fortunate in that my passion is very employable. It's not a lot of people like me. I am very, very busy. And in fact, anybody in our field knows that this transition in general, what the work we do, the work Beacon does, there's just honestly far too few of us and far too much need. So I haven't had this issue, but a lot of my friends have. They chose a degree or training based on, and one of them actually several of them have disabilities. One of them has Tourette's, another one has autism, and very capable, but they chose their degree or training based on what they wanted to study. Well, that makes sense, right? Well, yes. But if your degree is something like history, and you tell me, I don't want to teach, what the heck are you getting a degree in history for then? Because what is your employment outcome? What are you going to do? The answer is probably nothing related to history. It's not fun to say, but those are the facts. It's not a highly employable field. Now, are there employable fields? Absolutely. There's tons of them. You can even look, federal government has a whole website dedicated called Own It, dedicated to helping people find employability fields and fields that lead, to a higher, what we kind of call a cost benefit. A college degree gets you X amount of dollars versus how much you spend to get it. There's resources to find out all this information. You don't have to just listen to me. But that's a huge thing I see as well. And what I tell people is I'd love for a combination of the two. Yes, I totally get they need to be interested, Great, I'm just gonna throw something out. Let's say accountants are in demand. By the way, they're actually not, so don't do that. But let's say accountants were in demand. And I happen to love accounting. Great, okay, I know that doesn't always work. Or what happens if accountings are in demand, but I don't wanna be an accountant, which would be me. I don't know. If you're an accountant, bless you. I just don't wanna do it. That job would just stress me out so much. And so, for me, that's a high employability field, let's say in this case I'm saying it is, but if I don't want to do it, I get that. So I know there's a balance, right? It can't be one or the other. But what I try to do and what we do in our evaluations is try to help our clients find a balance. Find somewhere where you can get that degree that you are interested in with the coursework you are interested in, but also doing it in a field where you can either shift or sidestep to another job, where you have a plan A and a plan B, or you've got a really wide field that you can look at different options. So really start thinking about that as well. Limitations of adult services funding and providers, especially for higher functioning individuals, folks with learning disabilities. I'll give you a good example. In Texas, you can look it up. We have thousands of Medicaid waiver providers. If you're not familiar with what Medicaid waiver is, those are generally state-funded services. Florida has them too. I don't know if they're called the same thing here, but basically state-funded services for people with intellectual disabilities, people that are generally intellectually a little bit lower functioning, not always, but generally not college-bound. And so there's tons of providers doing that work. However, if a parent calls me from, I don't know, Idaho, some state, and they call us in Texas, which happens daily almost, and ask my staff, is there somebody like Bloom Consulting? Is there something like what you guys do in my area? And the answer is usually no. And if you know of somebody or you find someone, please call us back and tell us so we can have that as a resource for families that call. There's just not a lot of folks that work with those higher level individuals. There's just not. And to be honest, a lot of that is institutional and it's history. For a long time, people with disabilities, the focus was on physical disabilities, things that, individuals that were blind, visually impaired, hearing impaired. So part of it is just history. We've had a long time serving those folks, so naturally we have a lot of people doing that work. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of people coming out and serving the higher functioning populations, and that's a problem. Overemphasis on academics leading to inadequate social independent living and pre-vocational preparation in high school. I have lost count of the number of students and parents that have said, well, we know he needed study skills. We know he needed, independent living skills. We know he needed social skills, but he was taking AP classes and he just couldn't fit it in his schedule. And I'm like, I hear you. So AP calculus is definitely so much more important than social skills, right? It was so much better that he has AP calculus. No, you have to really look at, again, I get it. I'm not knocking calculus. It's great, But if you need it, but if you don't need it, what do you need? And a lot of the folks that I've worked with, honestly, they would have been so much better served by getting support for all those other things that have nothing to do with academics. Because unfortunately, now what we have is we have someone out of high school, out of school services, out of K-12, with a lot of academic knowledge, a high IQ, and very few other skills. And they're at home. And so that's a problem. And then parent expectations, I'll talk about my study in a second. And the requirements of competitive work differ from school, and I'll talk about that as well. So my study, with my dissertation, I looked at, I sent out a survey across several states, really my question was, what is the relationship between parent factors, things that parents are doing or not doing, and the successful employment of adults 26 or older diagnosed with ASD? And I looked at 3 different types of variables. I looked at demographics, things like parent income, education level, gender, ethnicity, kind of traditional stuff every study looks at. Behavioral expectation, or not expectation, excuse me, behavioral, like visible behaviors or observable behaviors, I think that's the word I was looking for. And then psychological factors, and my particular factor was expectations. 92 parents responded from about 48 states, including Hawaii and Alaska. I don't know anything more than that because we kept the study as anonymous as we could. And parental characteristics. With demographics, we did not find a relationship. So some studies have found a relationship between employment and coming from a family that has a higher SES level. My sample, at least, didn't find that. Okay. Now, granted, that's 92 people, but in my sample, I didn't see that. Parent behaviors, positive, negative behavior, didn't see a connection there either. However, what we did find is parental expectations did have a meaningful relationship with successful employment. And another way to say that is a parent's positive expectations may actually increase the likelihood of their adult child is achieving a successful employment outcome. And I'm going to add something to that makes this really make sense. Regardless of functional level, everything else aside. And the reason I think that's important is, yes, I'm saying that just by believing in the individual, by a parent having higher expectations, chances are statistically your son or daughter is going to achieve at a higher level and is probably going to get employed just by you believing that. You're welcome. Take that home today. I'm serious. Like that's just, and it's been proven. There's statistics. You can read my study. It's not just my opinion. And so really think about that and internalize that. And I think, Beacon, I heard a lot of people talk about empowering students and student-centered and what I love, and that's what I love, and that's what I believe too. So in that vein, really think about that just that act of believing it and those higher expectations really can actually lead to real change. Requirements of competitive work. Now, some of these do overlap with college and do overlap with school, but some of them don't. So socially appropriate work behaviors, okay? There is a lot more tolerance at a school, K-12, and honestly, depends on the college, but some colleges, than there is tolerance in the workplace. So in Texas, and I don't know where Florida is in this, in Texas, being a right-to-work state, you can fire an employee for any reason at any time. You don't even have to give a reason. You can just say you're fired. And I will tell you, many, many times our clients have lost jobs. They were not told why, but I would almost bet you it was for that one. It was that they didn't have socially appropriate work behavior. And an employer doesn't have to tolerate that. That's not a workplace accommodation. Oh, well, he upset one of the customers. Well, he has a disability. They don't care. They don't have to care. That's not what ADA says. They don't have to give them special treatment. So socially appropriate work behaviors is really, really crucial. I don't want to knock my own kind. That sounds weird to say this. But I have met some folks on the spectrum, like myself, very intellectually capable, very, very, very much capable of achieving a lot. And for lack of a better word, they're snobby jerks. And I'm telling you this because I've met some parents and are like, I don't know why my son doesn't have a job. And I'm like, I know, because he's a jerk. And actually, there's another word that starts with an A and ends with an O that I would say is probably more appropriate, but I'm being nice today. So he is. Now, is he smart? Yep. Does he have autism? Yep. But guess what? Some people with autism aren't nice either. That's not exclusive to people that are, neurodiverse or not, or anything like that. There's not a connection, I can promise you. I've worked with many clients, and I've taught students, not a connection. So that's something to consider, is even if you are really capable, you still got to get along with people. You still have to get along with your boss. Ability to perform the essential functions of a job, pretty straightforward. That's kind of, you got to be able to do the job if you're going to get paid to do the job. My boss, the way he puts it, our CEO, Bruce Williams, says, real work for real pay. Employers want to pay real money, so they expect real work, disability or not. They're able to operate independently. A parent's role has to really transition in employment from that of an advocate to an advisor. That is very much the role, and really think about that, advocate to advisor. What does an advocate look like? What does an advisor look like? My parents had to do that with me, and I can't tell you the day they did it or when it happened. It wasn't like a switch. There wasn't like a beautiful light came over me, and I saw a flock of seagulls. No. That happened. I don't know when it happened. But, my parents now have the role, which most of probably your parents do, which is, if, they're with us, is as an advisor, right? Is that, hey, I need advice. Totally appropriate, very much an important role for a parent. Thank God I have my parents to give me good advice. My wife and I bought her first house about 2.5 years ago, and you start throwing out terms like PMI and interest rates and APR versus interest, I'm like, I had my mom like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? Are they trying to mess us over? Are they trying to get us? What are they doing? Like, I had all these questions. It's just, again, advisor, right? Able to manage their own time, including breaks, arriving and leaving on time, really crucial. You can't clock in. You can't get to work 4 hours early. You can't clock in, especially if it's a retail job where you're being paid hourly. The employee we had was like, but I'm on time. I'm early. I want to get to work and work hard. And I'm like, man, I hear you. But guess what? Your employer doesn't want to pay for 4 extra hours for you to work from like 4 to 8 when everybody comes in at 8. Like, sorry, like that has to be up to the employer. So you can't be too early. You can't be late either. I can tell you, if it's not for the top one, socially appropriate work behavior, that one there is the other reason a lot of our clients lose jobs or don't get them or don't keep them. Coming in late, coming in too early, usually it's more of the late, it's more of the problem. And then able to perform activities of daily living. My staff and I have a saying, you can come to work and get dirty, but you can't come to work dirty. Think about that. So, give you a good example. From Austin, Texas, Central Texas, it's in the hundreds in the summertime. Fabulous. A little drier than here, so a little better, but not much. And we have clients that'll work outdoors doing something. We actually have a lot of clients. This is, again, we talked about stereotypes with Steve Silverman earlier, who's an amazing person, by the way. His book is incredible. If you haven't read it yet, highly recommend it. There's those stereotypes, right? Well, everybody with ASD is going to be a computer programmer in IT. Some are, but no, not everybody. But it's the same thing here. We actually have a lot of clients. So I have people that will tell me, well, you don't have any clients that want to do outdoor stuff. Yeah, I do. So we actually have clients that love agriculture. We have clients that love forestry, and we actually have one that we work with that wants to landscape golf courses, and I think he's actually going to be amazing at it. Like things like that. No, totally. And so, what we tell them is, hey, you can't come to the job without showering, smelling, without brushing your teeth, having an odor. That's not okay. However, if you work outside in the 110-degree heat and then you get really sweaty, that's okay because you were on the job. And I know that sounds really silly, but that's the norm of a workplace. And a lot of times our clients don't understand that. So what have we tried? And if you have something else that you've tried or anything you want to pipe in, feel free. I've given you a lot of content to consider. Now I'm going to shift as we get towards the end more to questions and discussion. So raise your hand and pipe in if you have something to add. What have we tried? And not just we. By we, I mean a big we. Not just my company, not just me, not just me personally, not just my staff personally. I mean we and folks I've talked to. I've worked with different colleges all over the country. Most of the ones I've worked with are like public schools that aren't like Beacon. They actually basically start a program within their university. And so one of the ones I do a lot of consulting with is Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. I have an amazing program called the CASE program. And so these are things that also I've gotten from them. Placing students in internships. Okay, a lot of colleges do that, both those that specialize in learning differences and those that do not. Definitely can be effective. But the other thing that we've seen is just because they get an internship doesn't mean they keep it. And just because they get an internship doesn't mean they get a job. And especially with a lot of students that we've seen, parents have said, well, you know, we had a good internship experience, but I didn't hire him. Well, a lot of times that could be those unspoken things, socially inappropriate social, social behavior. Are they going to tell the student, yeah, no, we're not hiring you because you're weird? No, but they definitely, if they can think it and they can not hire you because of it. And actually, the sad part is weird is not a disability, so they actually could tell you that, but they're not going to. Developing relationships with employers, totally worthwhile. The challenge that a lot of providers like I have, though, is not every client wants to do every work or every job out there, right? So there's that challenge of, okay, well, we have to really look at, is it something the client wants to do? Because if they don't want to do it, then I'm developing a relationship with an employer that I may not necessarily need long term. And so for providers, it's not impossible, but it's tougher for us to do that. We have done that. We just, we'll come to parents and say, and we'll have parents say, well, how many relationships with employers do you have? And it's like, well, what kind of employer are you looking for? What kind of interest does your son have? What kind of degree do they have? Because no, I don't have a relationship with one employer or more in every industry available in America. If I did, wow, that'd be awesome. I don't. Coordinating with VR counselors and providers. That is what we've tried that. Sometimes that has worked fabulously. I was talking with some friends at lunch about this earlier. Sometimes that's worked really well. Other times, not really worked at all. Utilizing on-campus services and support such as career services. One of my pet peeves is a lot of the large public schools, I'll talk to them about what I do, right? I'll actually do this presentation. And they say it to me, I can see it in their face. They're like, oh, we got this. We got career services. We have a whole department. Good, check. Done. Yeah. And I asked them, so what does your career services department do? Well, we help connect them to jobs. Okay, you mean like Indeed, like the big website that's free for everybody? Okay, cool. And we get them resumes. Yeah, pretty much get that from a lot of different places too, okay? And then what else do you do? We have to workshop every once in a while. Okay, cool, so we got workshops, random workshops. That's what you got. No, and I'm not knocking career services. I know some do a little more than that. I'm just saying, generally speaking, just having a career services department isn't gonna meet the need of someone with a learning difference or a disability, especially if those needs are pretty great. So that's not a checkbox, and that is, like I said, not a frustration with people here. That is a frustration I have with universities, and I'm like, look, I get it, but you're not providing the services they need, so it doesn't matter that you have that. Attending job fairs with students. I have some of the programs I've worked with, they have literally sent their program staff, their learning mentors, their advisors with the students to job fairs. It can be helpful. It cannot be. I will tell you, for the most part, in 2019, and I see this only getting more extreme as we move forward, hiring decisions aren't made in a job fair. Where are they made? Online. They're made in a portal for employers. I use one to hire people for my company. I know all about it. That's where those decisions are made. The other place those decisions are made are mixers, social events, outings at a bar, intern fun days, all those different social, high soft skills kind of environments. Decisions are also made there too, even if they're not verbalized. So that's something to consider. I'm not saying don't go to job fairs. Do. Job fairs are a great way to meet an employer and to identify a job and identify an employer. They're great for that, and actually we do take our students to do just those two things. Many times, not all, but many times though, hiring decisions are not made at a job fair. Now there's exceptions, but they're exceptions. Providing resume, cover letter, and interviewing preparation. A lot of schools do that. A lot of career services departments do that. Can be really useful, but also a pretty common service. You can also get help with, honestly, a lot of these things now online. One of my clients, I was sharing with them, I don't know if you know this, but Microsoft Word now has a resume builder built into it that connects through LinkedIn that'll help you build a really good resume. If you have Microsoft Word, it's already included, free. It's great stuff, good stuff, use it. I'm all about it. So that's actually, we've gotten more and more resources here for all people, all job seekers, which is great. Addressing social skills deficits both formally and informally. So some of the programs we work with do social skills groups. Some of them do peer mentors. Some of them do social events and outings. And they do have mixed results. Some individuals really benefit from those. I think there's definitely value. However, there's a big issue that a lot of folks don't consider. And that is, first, many of the individuals that we work with are not the kind of people that are going to self-identify they have a disability with anybody more than they have to. And even then, they're going to be resistant to that. So many times they don't want a special friend. I've had this conversation actually. There's a conference. If you're interested, I highly encourage you to go. It's called the College Autism Network. I'll be there in 2 weeks in Nashville. But basically, it's all these college programs from around the country that serve students with autism that come together and just share stories, information, research. We have a research track. I'm presenting a similar presentation and doing an employment lecture there in 2 weeks. It's can.org, by the way, is the name of the organization. You can look them up. But what I will tell you even there is we've had that same conversation of like, okay, but what if the student doesn't want to be identified? What if the student isn't at Beacon, they're at a public school, and they have autism or a learning disability or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, what have you, and they won't identify? Then how are they going to participate in those events? How are they going to know about them, and are they even going to go even if they did know about them? Really more interesting, and I can go off on a tangent on this, so I'm going to keep it short, but one of the studies presented by Texas Tech, the institution I consult for, they did basically look at all their RAP plans, and without going into a huge kind of side of what a RAP plan is, basically it's they have mentors and they write these like year-long plans and goals for the students that are in their college support program. And they did analysis over, I believe it's 7 or 8 years now that the program's been in existence. And what was interesting is they looked at what goals students brought up. And so RAP plans are student-driven goals. They're like person-centered plans. Okay, the student-driven, the student gets to pick what goals they have, not the parent, not the school, not the college, not the mentor. They just guide. Okay, it's great process, by the way. And what was interesting is they did an analysis of all the types of goals and categories, and came up literally, I believe it was over 1,000 goals, maybe 1,200 goals across all the students in their program across this 8-year period. Guess what percentage of the goals were about disclosure and self-determination, like sharing about their disability? Guess what percent? Less than 1%. Less than 1. And as a researcher, Wes Dotson, the PhD that runs the program and that coordinates their autism center, he said, what does that mean? That means that by and large, our students don't want to talk about their disability. They don't want to disclose it to the whole world. And that's where that last thing can be a really big issue. You know, he said when the program first started, we tried peer mentors. They don't want a special friend. They don't want that. They don't want to be identified in that way. So it's just, again, I know there was a long aside, but really think about that, because we have to be careful when we're preparing these types of workplace supports. I'm a big believer, as it was shared earlier today, in universal design. Why? Because universal design is for all students. It's for all people. It's things that help everyone. Universal design is a great remedy to the problem I'm describing, because it doesn't focus on doing special things for special students. And we really, really have to be careful with that, because I see a lot of students that won't accept help or won't come to an awesome place like Beacon because, they're like, well, that's a place for people with learning disabilities. That's a place for people with learning differences. And I get that's a student issue, right? But it's an issue, and it's a common one. So really looking at, and I think Beacon does an amazing job in being a college first and then being that support, but some places don't, and you really have to think about that. So that's a big, I'm thinking about it too now. I'm like, we could spend a long time thinking about that. It's a big thing to consider. Potential solutions. So I'll talk a little bit about pre-employment transition services that my staff and I do. It's one solution. It's not the solution. There is no the solution to anything. Utilizing vocational assessment tools to guide students. I talked about that. The problem is it's actually quite hard to find vocational evaluation providers. We have families call us from all over the country that don't know of one near them, and they end up flying to Texas to work with us, not because we want to. Right now we have a waiting list of about 3 months because we have so many, but they just can't find anybody else. Educating employers through direct training or partnering with other organizations or providers, kind of like what we do, but also Integrate, the company I talked about earlier. I definitely check them out. By the way, to find them, I don't know their website address, but if you Google Integrate and autism, then you'll find it's the first result in Google. And I know because that's how I find the website. So, advocating for VR policy change, funding, and additional services beyond job placement supported employment. We've come a long way, at least in Texas. I don't know about other states. Rewind 10 years ago, and VR meant, you want to get a job at X grocery store. You want to get a job in retail, right? That's what we do. Although people didn't say that, that is the reality of what was happening 99% of the time. However, in those 10-year period, we have a lot of different services now. So for instance, in Texas, our VR agency will pay for ABA therapy to work on workplace-related behaviors. Now, it's not long-term. It's not years long. It's limited visits, of course, just like anything else, right? but they will pay for it. And 10 years ago, they did not pay for it. And it's a huge win that we got that. We actually have a parent who is now working for our VR system that has been an amazing advocate to get that through. We also have social skills classes. So now if our VR counselors can refer a group of students with various learning disabilities, autism, it doesn't have to be any specific disability, they can refer them to us to get social skills training that is vocationally relevant and vocationally based. That also 10 years ago really didn't happen. So we're making progress, but that's definitely still another piece. And then utilizing your own staff or high quality providers to provide additional services for your students. And so I'll talk about pre-ETS as something we do, or tongue-tied today. Pre-employment transition services. Part of it, these are great presentations. I'm still thinking about what everybody else talked about earlier, and now I'm mixing it in my head with my stuff. But good stuff to think about. But so there's other ways to do that, and obviously other options too. And we'll do some, I want to leave some time for questions, and we can kind of go over some options and things you guys want to ask and share. So do you know about WIOA and pre-TS? So anybody, if I can get a show of hands, who in here has heard of WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and or pre-ETS? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Wow, a couple people, one or two. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm telling you this then. So our government actually, for once, did recognize that this is an issue. This problem of underemployment for people with various learning differences and disabilities, it is a huge issue. And so they reauthorized the 1973 Act, which was WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And one of its requirements, and there's many, I'm not going to go through all of them for time's sake, and because it is after lunch and you would fall asleep. But one of those requirements is vocational rehabilitation agencies, every state, okay, Florida included, have to set aside at least 15% of their federal funds to provide pre-employment transition services to students with disabilities who are eligible or potentially eligible for VR services. So pre-ETS is pre-employment transition services. The federal government, basically as part of this legislation, RSA, the Rehab Services Administration, as well as DOE, Department of Education, passed down these 5 domains and said, these are the 5 domains that students with various disabilities at all different levels, these are 5 common domains that we want to address and that we know they need. And when I read them, you'll understand. And so we have job exploration counseling, so figuring out what degree you're going to get, figuring out what job you're going to get, exploring job opportunities, job options, right, just like it sounds. Work-based learning on site. That's where a client, or we're training a student or training an individual, doing some type of service where we're training them on a real workplace environment. Counseling on post-secondary opportunities. Looking at places like Beacon, looking at public universities, private universities, programs, technical schools. There's a whole list of goals under each of these that I could go through, but I won't for time. Workplace readiness. That is the one that we spend most of our time addressing. And that is because it's where soft skills lie. It's where some of the real common things like resumes, cover letters, soft skills, interviewing strategy, all that comes under that 4th domain of workplace readiness. By the way, again, these aren't Texas domains, these are federal things. And then self-advocacy, okay? That's the 5th domain. Very, very important as well for many reasons, as we talked about earlier. That connection between self-advocacy, self-determination is very strong. To qualify, and this is a federal requirement, students have to be age 14 to 22. A common issue is parents say, well, what if they're over 22? Well, they could get support, but not through this particular funding source. This particular funding source, the Fed said 14 to 22. They have to be enrolled in secondary or post-secondary education, some type of school. People ask me all the time, does it have to be accredited? No, it just has to be some type of post-secondary education or secondary education. So K-12, post-secondary ed of some kind. And then they have to be receiving special ed services or 504 services due to a diagnosed disability. Those are the 3 basic requirements that the feds have for any student getting services through this. And by the way, every state tweaks it a little bit and changes maybe some words and adds an and in or a the in or takes a word out because every state has to, I guess, put their touch on it. But this is the basics. I just gave you kind of the core things that are a part of that. Well, what does all that gook lead to? What it leads to is once that act was reauthorized under the Obama administration, it was about the last year of his term. It took a while, of course, because right, it's all got to trickle down. But all that money, that next fiscal year came down, and they said, okay, Texas, Florida, Wisconsin, Connecticut, all these places, you need to spend 15% of your funds, your total VR budget, on these services. Well, in a state like Vermont or New Hampshire or Rhode Island, it's not a lot of money, maybe. In Texas, it's $37 million. It's a lot. And you have to spend that $37 million, again, just referring to Texas because I happen to know the figure. You have to spend it on just those services. So spend it. Well, the challenge with VR is you have to have providers that can do a service to be able to spend it. And so 2.5 years ago, our state agency in Texas put out a proposal and said, hey, with this money, with these domains, you tell us how you're going to prepare students with disabilities for college and career. Tell us. Okay? You just tell us. We're giving you the goals. You tell us how you're going to do it. So at the time, I was ecstatic about this opportunity. As a former special ed teacher who came into transition, got my master's because I love this field and I love helping people with disabilities succeed as adults, I was like, this is it. Like, this is a huge answer. It's not the answer, but it's a huge answer to the problem we have, that pre-workforce preparation, right? So I wrote up a proposal. I told my boss about it. He said, yep, send it in. I thought I was going to do one of these camps, is what we call them, one of these 2-week programs. We cover 25 objectives in those 5 domains. I thought I was going to do one of them. Program got approved. First year, we did 3. The next year, we did 25 in 2 states. And this year, we'll see how it goes. It's just October. It'll be probably many more than that even by May. That's why we actually have offices in Nevada and in Houston now. And what's been amazing about that is we've literally now helped hundreds of students, and hopefully hundreds more, get this kind of this pre-work training. And I don't have it in here just because it wouldn't really look good in a slide, but if you go on our website and look at On the Right Track, which is the name of our program, you can look up the 25 goals I'm talking about, and I would, and here's why. Because these are things you can address with your student. These are things that Beacon College staff can address with students. These are things that any K-12 school can address with students. And they're not big things. Some of them are like resume development, things that I know people are already doing. But then some of them are a little more, I don't know if we're hitting that, or we're not hitting as hard as we should. So check it out. Look at those goals. It doesn't have to be our program that provides the instruction, but the instruction is definitely needed. And we're working with other state VRs. So we did it in Texas that first year. We got contacted by the state of Nevada's, basically their head transition person at the state level. They asked us to bring our programs and services to Nevada, and that's why we're there now. And it's went extremely well. If you look on our Google webpage, a lot of the reviews are from parents that have done the program. And honestly, it was a crazy summer, made it totally worth it. We had parents share, I mean, actually just go on there and read them, because I can't even do them justice because I'm not the parent. But wrote it just about what the camp meant to their son or daughter, what they learned. We had parents talking about their son or daughter getting jobs. We talked parents talking about that they didn't know what they wanted to do for college, and they finally, through the camp, found what the major they want to pursue, and they didn't think they were ever going to find that. Like, really amazing, amazing stuff. Because again, these skills aren't rocket science. You're going to read, honestly, the 25 goals, and you're going to say what most people say to me, which is, James, everybody needs these. I know. Tell your congressman. We'd love to do them for everybody because they are needed. Those are things everybody needs. Unfortunately, right now, 14 to 22 with a disability and a student is where we have a funding source and a contract. But really, really, just can't say that enough. We have the program I was telling you about, Texas Tech University's Burkhart Center for Autism. They actually did a 1-week camp, and the difference between theirs and ours is we don't do overnight, we don't do residential, and they do. So they actually have the students stay in a dorm overnight. And did a 1-week camp. They also didn't cover as many goals as we did. I think they covered like 20 goals instead of the full 25. But the big difference was the residential piece. My staff and I, we're not a college or university, so we don't have access to dorms, things like that. It's also just messy, so that's why. But that's another option. And there's other options out there. I'm sure, I don't know about the pre-ed services in Florida. I'm sure there are some happening here. I don't know about them, but I'm sure there are. Again, every state has to have some type of service. And just so you know, they look differently. So some of these services can be a university actually themselves directly, like, I'm just going to pick a school that I've heard of, University of Central Florida, just because I've happened to have heard of it. They could say, hey, VR, we want to do a program. So it can be the university themselves. Public schools can actually get funding and do the program themselves. Do they? No, because they're too busy doing K-12 education. Which I've tried to explain to friends at RSA at the federal level, and they don't seem to understand that. I'm like, you know how busy special ed teachers are? They don't need more. Even with money, they don't need more. So that doesn't happen often, but the colleges are definitely doing some services. And then providers like us. There's also some big nonprofits you've heard of, people like Goodwills. It depends on Goodwills are different everywhere, but some Goodwills do services in their area. Easter Seals, some of the Easter Seals in Texas do pre-ed services. Just depends on the provider, depends on the area. But some really, really good services and support that I think are really incredible and kind of key to that piece of what we're looking for. Okay, Daryl, you keep me on track with questions, because I could talk a lot. By the way, I'm on the panel, so if we don't get to your questions, it's not a big deal. You can always just ask me later. So I'm not going anywhere. But yeah, I guess let me end with this just because I want to leave you with something, kind of a nugget to take home, and then we'll go to questions. Keep your mind open. This is not the end of the journey. Beacon College is an amazing place. They can't live with them forever. They can't live in Daryl's office. I mean, I'm sure he'd be nice about it, but come on. No, like this is not the end of the journey. This is honestly, I think of it as the middle, right? You had K-12 as the start, college is the middle, career and employment is maybe you could say the last step, although some people could argue, turning 65, maybe that's its own step. I don't know, we're not gonna go into that. But we're just gonna say that this is not the end. And so really think about that and think about what degree are they getting? Is it employable? If it's not, have that conversation with them. They need to have that conversation with an advisor. They need to look at what options are out there. There's a lot of amazing opportunity. Florida's a large state with a really nice, diverse employer base, so you guys have lots of options here. Tell you, I go to places in rural Texas. I'm not joking. There's a city in rural Texas I spoke at, and I asked the person that is school district special ed director who invited me. I said, so what jobs are around here? She's like, well, oh, and I'm sorry, East Texas. Well, we have a chicken plant, and most people work there. And I'm like, oh, okay. What else? A gas station? But there's only 2 guys on duty, so there's not a lot of jobs. She wasn't joking. I'm like, okay, got it. So that's a different story. You don't have that issue. You're close to a large metropolitan area, especially here. A lot of you guys have students from larger cities, so you've got some employment options. Really look at them. Last thing is, really stay focused. I don't expect your son or daughter to be like me. Please don't. I tell people I can barely handle one James Williams. My wife only wants one too. Let's not add more. I don't need another me. Please, just don't. But what I would say is if I can be successful in their chosen field, in their area, they can too. I was also an individual who was told, my parents were told that I would not be successful, told that I'd be lucky if I got out of college. I went through those same really disheartening conversations. My parents, to this day, are, I'm not going to say shocked because that implies that they didn't believe me. They did, but are still pleasantly surprised all the time when I tell them about things that I'm doing. They know like, hey, they had high expectations, and they really did. My parents pushed me every step of the way, which is a lot of why I did my study. It's very personal. So thank you guys so much. Questions? Oh yeah, in class too. And it can be about anything, not just my content. If you want to ask about relationship, anything that I can answer, I'm happy to answer. Mike, yeah.
Thank you. Is the burden on the student to get the funding, or if you're here
it's kind of unusual. So it depends. That's a fantastic question. Depends on every state. I'll tell you how it works in Texas. It may be different here, but I can tell you, it rolls very easily. Okay, good to know. In Texas, basically how it works is we actually work with, it's like a triangle. We work with the school, who then lets the parents know they're going to offer it, and the school then connects them to VR or vice versa. So it's like a triangle, and it's like VR funds it, school provides space or gets the word out to families, and then we provide the service. So that's how it works in Texas. And I'll give you an example, though. In Nevada, it's actually a different way. In Nevada, if they meet those requirements for those services, we actually can do a reverse referral, meaning we can go find them and talk to schools, and then go build the state later after the fact. So those 2 states themselves are very different. I don't know about Florida. I don't know how Florida's referral process is, but all of the services we provide, families do not pay for them. We build a state, we build a VR agency, so they're not paying anything for those services. As you can imagine, that's part of why, after I say this, you're going to laugh, but when my boss was like, you didn't expect the program to be big? And I was like, no. He's like, it's 2 free weeks of summer camp. What parent says no to that? I was like, good point, good point. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there's not a burden on the family. I have had families that have like gone to their VR counselor and gone the other way, and like the family, let's say, heard me at a conference, which I do a lot of conferences when I have time, and they'll then go to the counselor, and so sometimes that will work too. I don't know Florida's process or what state you're from, but it's generally something like that in every state.
See that you're associated with George Mason, so are you going to have one of these in Virginia?
I would love to. So I'm an adjunct professor, and I have a really good contact who actually is a part of the CAN planning committee with me for the College Autism Network I talked about earlier. I'm working on it. Yes, I'd love to. I really would love to. And Virginia, yes, I would love to. It's in the thinking stage where we're trying to move it forward. We plan on branching out. We started in Texas. In 1 year, we already went to Nevada and went to another city in Texas. So I'm sure it's just a matter of time. But I would love to.
My son's 21, so can you hurry?
Oh, okay. I'll hurry. I'll let them know. I got somebody. He needs to get in now. I will tell you the good thing is what we, at least in Texas VR, as long as the individual applied and got the service approved prior to 22, it didn't matter if they turned it after the service started. At least, and we have had that happen several times, where the parents are like pressuring the counselor, sign the paperwork today, because they want to get them in. But yes, I will do my best. Good to know.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I actually have a question.
Yes, definitely.
This past summer, my son applied for a job with AMC movie theaters because they have the Focus program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And after, because everything's online and they have like a whole questionnaire and
Pretty intense.
questions repeat themselves but in different ways. And it was all about like social skills, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's right, what's wrong. Even if, something is happening, should you do X, Y, and Z, whatever it was. And I actually kind of thought about it afterwards and was like, maybe he shouldn't have applied through that program, because I actually feel like we never heard back. But would that stand in the way he answered those questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I will tell you, and I'm going to keep my response very short. I detest pre-hiring screenings. Detest them. I personally believe that they're illegal. They haven't been proven to be illegal yet, but I want an attorney who would fight it, and I would love to support that. The reason why is a lot of employers use them, and what ends up happening is many people, not all, but many, I'd say that's a fair assumption, many people with disabilities get screened out from ever getting a job before they ever even talk to the employer, because they don't answer those the right way. But does that mean that person who's been screened out wouldn't be a good employee? No, it doesn't mean that. So I think it's a form of discrimination. That's my opinion. That said, people ask me, well, James, how do you get around it? And I've told employers this, by the way, and so it's not a mystery. You can tell anybody you want. We help our clients take the test. I've talked to managers and said, what do you want to hear? Because they're a great employee. If you give them a shot, how do we get them? How are you going to give them a shot? Tell us what you want them to say. And we have, actually. And you'd be shocked. Some managers hate them, too. And they'll be like, oh, just tell them to click mostly B's and then C's at the end. I had an employer that told me that, a manager, because he's like, I really need help, and he's great, and I'd love to hire him. But you know what he told me? This was at Walgreens. The reason that, and I have to say it like that because my dad's a store manager in Texas, so and he's been one for 30 years, but he's about to retire, so I guess it doesn't matter anymore. They can't do anything to him. But it was at Walgreens, and what's funny is the manager told me, even if I want to hire him, even if I interview him, if he doesn't get a certain score on that test, I can't consider him. The computer will not let me pick him. And so and again, which tells you right there's a problem with those tests. But he said, like, here, do this, because I want to give him a shot. So sometimes you get great managers, great employers like that. But I do, unfortunately, think it does make an effect. And that's why, one of the things we talk about with our clients, and by the way, our clients sit down in front of the computer, they take them, it's just our staff do it with assistants, because we don't want them to get knocked out of a job just because they can't click A versus B. It's ridiculous. But one of the challenges we tell a lot of our clients is, don't think about what you would do, you have to think about what they want you to say. Like, what is the most, and many times it's the PC answer. It's the PC answer is what it is. It's because everybody is multicultural and cuddly and butterflies and rainbows and unicorns, and because that's not really life, but that's what they're looking for. So we tell our clients, think about that. In the perfect world, answer that way. And so, that's a huge barrier. What I would do is do what we did. If you're, I don't know, as a parent, you've got to be careful with your role, but like as a provider, like I said, we've gone and advocated with a manager and said, look, we've got this guy. He really wants to work here. Here's his qualifications. We think he'd be incredible. Will you work with us? And as you know, that one manager was like, yeah, I really need people, and he seems great. So he worked with me. So that's a tough one. Mm-hmm. Question? Yes, ma'am. That's okay.
Were you always comfortable in public speaking?
No.
And what did you do to do that? Because that's a
lots
big
of practice. So I started
kids.
presenting when I was a senior in high school I just became a senior at a weird birthday at like 17, 18. So it gives you an idea of how long I've been presenting. I'm 32 now. My first 5 years, I was sweaty, shaking, a lot of Under Armour perspiration, very gross. It's just it is what it is, very gross. And like I very much was. A lot of it with me is practice. Also, it's therapy. So people tell me all the time. So I used to go see a counselor, and you know what I realized one day? I was saying, this is actually after my wife and I got married. And I told her, I said, I don't think I need to see my counselor anymore. And she's like, why? You love her. And I was like, yeah, I do. She's really nice. I said, but you know what? If I just present, I tell them the same stuff. And it's just as freeing. And sometimes they pay me doing it. So I did. And I really, that's what it is now, is I think I tell people when I present, I'm thinking about what I'm saying, and it helps me. I adjust myself. So in a way, it's been therapeutic for me. And I do people ask me, what is your favorite presentation to do? The one that's most therapeutic, and you're going to laugh when I tell you which one it is. My wife and I do a joint keynote. My wife is a high school choir director. She does not have a disability. At least that's not this diagnosed, but I'm biased because I'm her husband and I can't diagnose her. It's a different story. Not that I haven't tried. I have, but not appropriate. And she had to pull out my own ethics on me once. It was really funny. And I'm like, dang it, you read that book? How did you even know we had that book? But one of the funny things is her and I will do a presentation just about our experiences dating and getting married, and it's an hour and a half of me laughing at myself and us laughing at each other. But it's a really great presentation, and same thing, like I love that. It's super freeing, and I feel like when I give that presentation, people get a really good understanding of just how quote-unquote normal our relationship actually was. The things that I complain about, all those things, every wife complains about those things. Every husband complains about those things. And so for me, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very self-actualizing. It's very like, oh, it's common experiences, I get it. So that's a lot of it. And I'd say about 5 years in doing it, I just realized that. It kind of hit me one day at a presentation. And then I was like, there's nothing to be afraid of. Like these people want to hear me. They're interested in what I have to say. So what's the worst that can happen? And I also remind myself of this. If I mess up, most of these people I'm probably never going to see again, so who cares? One thing my wife said, she's like, I have a rule. I don't present close to home. No, I'm just kidding. But that's something just to consider. People ask me too, do I have a routine? So you'll notice today, I'm just going to point out my routine. When I go to conferences, I normally sit in the back before I present. Daryl knows because he was sitting with me today. Thanks for being my buddy, Daryl. And so I sit back there, not because I'm being antisocial, but it's because I have a people meter, and I have to reserve it in the morning so I can use it today. Does that make sense? And I'm very conscious of that. I can tell you after the presentation today, I will probably go back to my hotel room, turn all the devices off, and fall asleep because I'll have to recharge. It's just who I am, but I'm very self-aware of that now, so I know how to, and I know when to pull myself out of a situation. Like my wife knows when I withdraw, there's a reason. It's because my meter's spent and I just can't do it anymore. Bathrooms are great. Just not all of them smell great. It's kind of the problem, but sometimes, like people, we have clients that are like, well, he's in the bathroom. And I'm like, yeah, he's decompressing. Give him a second, man. Don't rush him. Like, he needed a break. So again, that self-awareness is crucial. And that has come from literally, being 32 and just having decades and decades, just learning all that. When I was 12, I was a very quiet kid. I had no friends, very socially awkward. I usually said the wrong thing, never the right thing. In fact, when I started saying the right thing, people was kind of odd. My mom was like, what? You didn't say anything inappropriate, man. It was kind of the other way. So I've come a long way. I also had a lot of interventions. So I had social skills training, speech pathology. I had occupational therapy that took my handwriting from can't read it at all to, wow, still awful, but kind of can make out a letter. And that, now I'm a doctor, so it's not a big deal. But before I was, it was just it was a problem. So good, somebody got that joke. It's just something to think about, but it's been an evolution for sure, right? I was not a ham from the day I was born. I also, and this is interesting because I guess I married a choir director, but I have a lot of the arts, and particularly music, is something that's very relaxing to me. I love musicals because they're very expressive, and I actually tell people a lot of the sayings I use come from musicals. It's kind of a problem though, because constantly there's a song for every situation in life, and my wife gets really tired of me quoting every line of everyone, of everything you've ever heard, and it's because it's an expression for me, and it's like, oh, so in the musical when they did this, that kind of makes sense to me of why you're saying this now. Like we actually went and saw a play in New York, and then I asked my wife at dinner afterwards, I was like, so when you've told me this, kind of like they just said today, did you mean what the play meant, or did you mean something else? And she's like, nope, I meant what the play meant. I'm like, okay, good to know. Only 10 years to figure that out. So, just stuff like that. I think there's a lot of, I'm constantly checking myself and looking at, okay, what am I doing? How are people reacting? It's a big thing too. I'm sorry, this is a really long answer, but it's a passionate question I have, or a passionate response that I really feel strongly about. a lot of it I tell my clients is that self-awareness, but also looking at how other people respond. So for example, I talk a lot when I've taught social skills for years, and I tell my clients, how do you present yourself? Are you attracting people? We use the magnet. Are you attracting people? Are you repelling people? If you're repelling people, look at how do you tell you're repelling somebody? And we have a list of things, frowns, backing up chair, turning body away. Like we have all the different nonverbals and verbals. I can write them out on a list. Fun list, by the way. Because some people do it, and I know that's not why they're doing it. And I'm like, well, they have their own social issues. That's not your problem. But that's a whole different conversation. But and it's like, no, they don't have a disability. They're just weird. It's fine. But you know, that piece there, looking at those nonverbals, I teach a lot of my clients. I was like, I look at how someone responds, determines my next statement, my next word, my next phrase. And some of them are just baffled by that. Because they respond, they don't do that. Like they just, they just spit it out. Everything just comes out. And it's like, no. Pause, see response, then spit. Pause, see response. It's kind of that idea of conversation, right? So I think that's a lot of it too, is it's self-awareness, but then it's also awareness of the environment and how people respond. And it's like, ooh, if someone is giving you some of these signals that they're not liking what you're saying or that they're disengaged, that's not a good thing, and here's why. Sorry, it's a really long response. Some of it was services. Some of it was my parents. Some of it was observing, quote unquote, neurotypical interaction. People watching, if you will. I did a lot of that at malls when I was a teenager. And I was like, how did these other 16-year-olds respond to their friends? And so I listened to the words they used and the motions they made and the high fives and things like that. And then I started doing that. Of course, granted, some of those things, I'm like, I'm not doing that because that would not be good. My mom will get mad at me. But like some of those things, particularly I would go to cursing. One day, it was kind of funny. I don't use profanity very often. And my mom knew that I had been people watching too much because I said the F word, and I never say that word, ever, even today. And she knew, you can't go to the mall anymore. Because that's the issue, right, though, is sometimes I didn't also, like, I kind of knew that one. I just got emotional and kind of slipped. But I knew, like, oh, that one, I'm like, but this one kid was really mad, and he said, F that. And so my mom said something I didn't like, and I said, F that. That did not go over near as well, though. Matter of fact, I think I lost my car or something for 2 weeks or something. But no, so like a lot of that too is that it's the failure and the learn. And I think that's to end my response to your question, and yes, it is a very long response, sorry, Daryl. But is that a lot of times what the best learning and the best teaching comes from failure. It's one of the biggest mistakes I think a lot of parents make, and educators too, we do it too, is we don't let students fail, they don't learn, and then they don't know. And so that failure is crucial. I believe full-heartedly that I've learned so much more in my life from failure than I ever have from success. Success is easy. Oh, I did it. Oh, I got an A. I get A's all the time. Not a big deal. And it's not, because I've always gotten A's. I wouldn't expect anything less of myself. But the failure in terms of like social relationships or my poor first relationships, oh gosh, before my wife, not her. I spared those other women, spared her the pain. But like knowing how I messed up there taught me how to do it better. And that's something that I really couldn't have learned without experiencing and without people in my life, my parents even, allowing me to fail. Okay, so awesome.
I have I'm Jesse Riddle with Vocational Rehabilitation in
Awesome.
Florida.
Hey,
So
yay.
I supervise the Lake and Sumter office in this area, and been working up here for about 4 years. So I can kind of go into a little bit about the services and the process and stuff like that. But you can always check out our website, which is rehabworks.org, and that'll give you a list of offices, the services, and give you a breakdown of how the process and stuff works. So. But just to touch on a lot of different things, the pre-employment services are available to those that are 14 and older, with the WIOA. And what we notice is that we have the services, we have the providers. It's just getting outreach and getting the parents, getting the students to participate. We have some excellent schools in the area that do refer a lot of their students. And then we have other schools where I think I got like 2 from one school last year with the entire school. And it's like there's the barrier between vocational rehab getting to the individuals with the disabilities and then, getting the parents and the individual to actually participate, once you get them there.
Definitely.
But we do a variety of different things. It's funny you mentioned Walgreens, because we do
Yeah.
in this area have the Walgreens Ready program, to
Yep.
where
We have it
they,
in Texas. Yep.
oh, you do? Yep.
Yeah.
So you're familiar
Awesome.
with that, which for the individuals, they can go in and work at Walgreens. They do a on-the-job training. It could be varied from 1 month to a couple months, and then they have the opportunity, if they do well enough, if they have an opening, they can get hired directly based off their performance and everything like that. But with the high school students as well, we do a variety of on-the-job training. We have all the self-advocacy, the work-based learning experience. So it's all those activities that they can get while they're in middle school and high school, because there is a deficit, I think, when you have those individuals that miss all of that. And of course, like, the law has changed recently within the last 3 or 4 years. So like you said before, they weren't typically available until they graduated high school. But we do a lot of different services with the county. We actually have the school board where we do the work-based learning experience with one of our high schools. So the students that are in those self-contained classrooms, they actually get out during the day and they're able to go and work at the city and different businesses in the area, so they can actually get the skills and they can get the communication. They work with the actual employees, so they have that variety of training. And then eventually they move on to whatever else their employment might be. But they can do that after school hours, weekends. So the services are there. It's just getting people to apply and bringing them into the office. And what we do as well is that we go to the middle schools, the high schools. We have our counselors that go in and sit there and meet them with the parents at the school, so they don't have to take the time out of their day and take them out of school to make it more accessible than driving to our office. So, we're at the schools every month, and, we're active in there, but just getting the referrals from them can be difficult sometimes.
Definitely. Well, and there's two things I would add to what you said, and one of them is Virginia is one of them, and as we talked about earlier, we actually, and I forget her name, she's in Tallahassee, but we talked to somebody at your state VR, it's like your person over transition for state VR. I forget her name. She's a wonderful lady, but and we actually would love to bring the program here. I need to touch base with her because at the time the provider thing wasn't open, but at some point when it is, we definitely would love to bring it here. Okay, January. There we go. Know when to look. Because that would be something we'd want to do. But he's right. We've actually seen the same thing in Texas. It's either feast or famine. So like, for instance, we had one school district in Northwest Austin who the counselor basically put it out to the schools, send us students, and we got a list of 50 students, like 50 students, all qualified, all eligible, and it took, thankfully we had months and it worked out. But we've got that, and then we actually have had services where the counselor wanted us there. The school even provided a space for us to host the service. Everybody was on board. We could not get families to send students. We could not, and I don't know why. I think part of it is we've noticed in some of our really rural areas, and I imagine a similar thing in Florida, is families don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what it is. So we would tell families, I started to have my staff, I would tell them, just tell them you're going to help their son or daughter get a job. This training is to help them get a job. And I think a lot of it, they hear pre-ETS and what's that? Why is that important? Why do I need to take time out of my day to fill out this form? Because it's really important because, da-da-da. And it's funny, but what we've learned is once the education piece is there and the parents know, I had one parent that I said, basically our camp is so your son or daughter can get a job, have a better chance of keeping that job, and can stay off your couch. And man, when I told her that, she's like, I'll sign whatever you want. And so once parents get that, they get it, but I found the same thing. It's either they get it or they're like, what? Nah, I'm not doing that. It's kind of that, and there's nowhere in between. So I understand your pain. I definitely do. Okay. Any other questions? I know we're probably getting close to time. Questions? I can't see with the light that well, so I'm going to do questions.
All right. I think that's it.
Awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. James Williams.
Thank you.